The iron gate clanged shut behind them, its echo long and cold. Aiko clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. She thought she had stepped into another hell where harsh discipline and humiliation awaited. The American guards walked ahead and behind, rifles slung lazily, hardly even glancing at them. That indifference was unsettling. They didn't even bother to despise the women. But then the column stopped, and the sight before them froze every breath. In the middle of the camp stretched a clear blue pool, shimmering under the blazing sun. Not a reservoir, not the muddy pit she had pictured, but a real swimming pool, tiled in white, with a shiny metal ladder and rippling water that glittered like glass. And there, as if in a dream, American women were swimming, sunbathing, laughing. They wore two-piece swimsuits, bodies slick with water, tan skin radiant with health. Some reclined on lounge chairs, oversized sunglasses, hiding half their faces, lips painted red. They smoked, blowing lazy streams of smoke into the air, then burst into laughter at some private joke. At the far end of the pool, another woman flipped through a glossy magazine, turning pages as if the war didn't exist. Water splashed high as two girls dove in, shrieking with delight. Laughter rang out, mixing with the crackle of a swing tune playing from a radio nearby. The whole scene was a holiday resort, not a prison camp in wartime. My God, aren't they ashamed? One Japanese prisoner whispered, clutching her ragged tunic tighter over her bony frame. Is this a prison? Another muttered, or paradise. Aiko said nothing. She remembered Kyoto, where women never dared reveal even an ankle in public. She recalled the mountain streams where girls had to walk miles to bathe in secrecy. Yet here, in full view, American women could tilt their faces to the sun, bare their skin, smoke and laugh, tossing themselves into water as if they owned the sky. It was as if an invisible hand had torn down the veil covering her mind. Every lesson drilled into her about honor, chastity, and a woman's duty to be meek trembled under the weight of that dazzling freedom. An older prisoner muttered hoarsely, "This is why we lost the war. Their women refused to stay at home." The Americans' laughter rolled on, cutting deep. Some of the Japanese women looked down in shame, while others stared, transfixed, repulsed, envious, bewildered all at once. Aiko's throat went dry. For a heartbeat, she imagined herself in a swimsuit, plunging into that cool water, washing away blood, dirt, and memories. But shame struck her like a lash. In the world she came from, that thought alone was worse than death. The guard jerked his chin, ordering them forward. But the image was already carved into their minds. Women swimming, basking, laughing in freedom, inside a prison. No one had prepared them for this, and no one knew that this single scene would unravel everything they thought they knew about America, about freedom, and about themselves. Before that iron gate closed behind them, before the sight of American women swimming and sunbathing turned their world upside down, these Japanese women had lived for months under a single fear, the dreaded white hell. Aiko could still recall the moment of her capture. She had been serving in a field hospital on Saipan, her hands stained with blood, the air heavy with groans and the stench of infection. American troops poured in, gunfire rattling, Japanese soldiers collapsing one by one. Her head nurse whispered, "We must choose an honorable death," then drew a dagger. But Aiko could not. Her body shook, her hands still pressed on a bandage, and instead she fell to her knees, surrendering with trembling palms raised high. Alongside Aiko, dozens of women were taken. Nurses, supply clerks, a few wives and daughters of officers dragged into the war by fate. Herded onto a transport ship, they were packed into the dark hold under the gaze of American guards. Days at sea stretched on, filled with whispered fears. What awaited them on the other side of the Pacific? In their minds, America was the monster from propaganda leaflets, brutal, merciless, a place where prisoners would be starved, humiliated, violated. That image gnawed at them through sleepless nights, where women clung to each other and murmured final prayers. Keiko, a woman in her 40s clutching a small rag doll, her only keepsake from a daughter lost in Tokyo's bombings, whispered, "They'll torment us, make us slaves." Beside her, Ayame, a former school teacher, forced down her tears. "Better to die. If they force us to undress, I'll jump into the sea." Their words pressed like stones onto every heart in that swaying, airless hold. Aiko remained silent. She had already seen too much blood. Death no longer seemed like honor, only a dark abyss. She didn't know what she wanted, only that as long as her heart still beat, perhaps there was still hope. When the ship finally docked in California, they were marched ashore under the shouts of American soldiers. Yet to their surprise, no one struck them, no one dragged them by the hair. Instead, they were lined up, handed bread and water, and loaded into trucks. For women who had gone hungry for days, the bread's rich sweetness was both suspicious and irresistible, like poison disguised as mercy. The ride inland took them through vast farmland. Sunlight poured down, blindingly bright. Some women lifted the truck's canvas flap, peeking out at endless fields of crops and scattered white houses. They had imagined America as smoke-stained factories and grimy cities. Instead, it seemed impossibly abundant. Aiko sat pressed between others, hands clenched on her lap. She thought of her widowed mother in Kyoto, living in hunger, never having known such plenty. Could her mother even imagine this land of excess? At last, the trucks rolled to a stop. A high gate loomed, flanked by guards. Hearts tightened. Here it was, the white hell. They braced themselves for beatings, hunger, shame, perhaps even death. But when they stepped through that gate, what they saw was not chains, not cruelty. It was a swimming pool glimmering in the sun, and American women laughing in swimsuits. Aiko would never forget the jolt of that contradiction, to be prisoners, yet confronted with the sight of freedom. That first night in camp was colder than expected. Wind slipped through the cracks in the wooden barracks, carrying the smell of moldy blankets and the constant rasp of insects. But it wasn't the chill or the noise that kept the women awake. It was the memory of what they had seen by day, lingering like a fever in their minds. Aiko lay on her back, eyes wide in the dark. Around her came sighs, restless shifts, muffled whispers. Finally, Keiko's husky voice broke the silence. What we saw today, was that real? Silence followed. The question hung heavy until Ayame, the former teacher, answered sharply, "Real enough. If it were a dream, we wouldn't still be locked inside these barracks." But those women, Keiko's voice trembled. They felt no shame. To wear swimsuits, to laugh before men. Back home, they'd be called disgraced, ruined. A faint laugh rose from the darkness. Yumi, barely in her 20s, spoke softly but firmly. Ruined? I thought they were beautiful, confident, like no one could tell them what to be. Think about it. If Japanese women could live like that, wouldn't life be different? The air tightened. Some drew in sharp breaths. Others shook their heads in the dark. Ayame suddenly sat up, her thin frame outlined in moonlight. Enough. Thoughts like that are poison. That freedom you envy is why their country wins and ours collapses. Women who dare lift their heads abandon duty. What order remains? We were taught our role, to support, to endure, not to flaunt our bodies before the world. Her voice cracked like a whip, meant to silence, yet Yumi did not back down. She leaned toward Aiko, whispering, "You saw it too, didn't you?" The way they swam, laughed as if nothing could touch them. Have we ever felt that, even once? Aiko bit her lip. A memory stirred. Kyoto, years ago, when she had watched boys splash in the river, while she and the other girls sat sewing on the bank. She had longed to run, to dive, but her mother's hand had gripped her arm. "You're a girl. Don't bring shame." That same longing now fused with the image of American women shining in the sun. Desire swelled in her chest, but so did guilt, each battling for air. "I don't know," she whispered at last. "It feels too different, like a world that isn't ours." Yumi said nothing more, but her eyes glinted in the moonlight. A rustle came from the far corner. Someone had pulled out a thin booklet. In the dim glow, they passed it hand to hand. A glossy magazine, smuggled or discarded. On the cover, a smiling American woman in a short skirt and high heels. Inside, page after page of cosmetics, perfumes, swimsuits. "Is this what they read?" Keiko murmured, fingertips trembling. Aiko leaned close. Her heart raced. The images were strange, almost brazen, yet they carried no shame. They radiated a certainty she had never seen. Women as people in their own right, not shadows behind men. Ayame snatched the magazine and hurled it to the floor. "Enough! This filth is what corrupts them. If we let it take root, we lose everything that makes us Japanese women." The thud echoed, silencing the room. But in many hearts, a seed had already been planted, of curiosity, of doubt, of dangerous yearning. That night no one slept. Whispers stretched till dawn, threads of words like freedom, disgrace, envy, difference. And lying awake, Aiko realized the real storm wasn't outside the fences. It had already begun inside their own minds, with a single question none dared answer aloud. If that is freedom, why are we so afraid of it? In the days that followed, the pool became a wound that would not close in Aiko's mind. Each morning at roll call, laughter carried from the water's edge. Even at a distance, the sight of American women diving, sunning, carefree, it gnawed at the prisoners. Aiko tried not to look, yet her eyes always betrayed her. She saw girls lounging on chairs, working shampoo into wet hair, water streaming down bare necks. She saw them stretch in the sun, skin glowing with sweat and light. Every glimpse stung, shame like fire, envy like a knife. One afternoon, returning to the barracks, Aiko overheard Yumi whispering to a circle of younger women, "If I could, I'd wear a swimsuit too. Just once. What's wrong with it? It's only skin in the sunlight." The others giggled, eyes sparkling with dangerous excitement. But Ayame stormed over, her voice like thunder. "Silence! Do you realize what you're saying? Have you forgotten who we are? We carry Japan's honor. That so-called freedom is filth. Corruption!" The room froze. Yumi pressed her lips together, but her eyes burned with defiance. Aiko stood in the corner, heart pounding. Ayame was not wrong. Japan had drilled into them that women must be humble, invisible. Yet a new voice inside her whispered, "If that's so, why do they look so alive, and we so dead?" That night, Aiko dreamed she leapt into the pool. The water closed over her, cool and cleansing, lifting the stench of blood from her hands. She laughed, spinning like a fish, but then her mother's face appeared above the waves, stern and pitiless. "You shame us." Aiko woke sobbing, her back damp with cold sweat. And then came tragedy. Keiko, the woman who clutched her daughter's rag doll, collapsed in the night, gasping for air. Her lips turned blue, her frail chest heaving. Prisoners screamed for help, guards rushed, but the doctor shook his head. The doll remained clutched tight, even as her hand went still. By morning, the camp buzzed with whispers. She had a weak heart. No, it was that pool, that shameless spectacle. Her spirit couldn't bear it. Ayame's voice cut like steel. She died with honor. She refused to watch our dignity rot. Mark my words, if we let our thoughts stray, we'll die the same way. Fear spread through the barracks. A wall rose up between them. On one side, those clinging to old codes. On the other, those tempted by a forbidden freedom. Aiko sat apart, staring at sunlight spilling through the cracks. Keiko's death pierced her, but also unsettled her. Was it truly noble to die clinging to rules that smothered the living, or was it simply a cage one carried into the grave? Later that day, passing the pool, Aiko lingered. A blonde American peeled off her robe, dove in, emerged laughing, water streaming down her body. And in that instant, it no longer looked like disgrace. It looked like release. Aiko pressed her palm hard against her chest, her heart hammering. A wild thought flickered. If I could do it just once, would everything change? But then Ayame's sharp voice sliced the air behind her. Don't stare. Remember, we are Japanese. Aiko jerked away, cheeks burning, yet deep inside, the fire had been lit. Envy, desire, fear, and she knew sooner or later it would consume her. A week after Keiko's death, the camp stirred with unusual energy. At dawn, American soldiers raised flagpoles, strung rope across the yard, and hauled out radios and loudspeakers. Soon the smell of roasting meat drifted through the air, foreign, intoxicating, making the prisoners' stomachs growl. That day, all prisoners were ordered into the yard. They had no explanation, only commands. Stand in lines, face the pool. What unfolded looked nothing like punishment. It looked like a festival. American women appeared in shorts, sleeveless tops, some even in bikinis. They laughed and shouted, playing volleyball on the sand, diving after the ball, tumbling into each other with carefree abandon. A swing tune blasted from the radio and smoke curled up from a grill stacked with sizzling sausages. From the men's barracks came bitter murmurs. Look at that. Women on equal ground with soldiers. What chaos. But for the women, the feelings were tangled. Some averted their eyes, cheeks tight with disapproval. Others could not look away, their faces torn between envy and awe. Aiko stood in the row, her fingers clutching her worn tunic. Her gaze locked on a group of Americans diving into the sand, hair flying, sweat streaking their bronze shoulders. One blonde girl leapt, caught the ball, then threw back her head in a laugh so free it pierced Aiko's chest like lightning. If this is corruption, she thought, why does it look so radiant? Then chaos erupted. At the end of the line, Yumi slipped off her ragged sandals. Glancing nervously at the guards, she crept to the pool's edge. Tentatively, her toes dipped into the water. Her eyes widened. Her face lit up with a rare smile. In a flash, Ayami lunged, yanking her back. "Are you insane? Do you want to disgrace us all?" The shout cut through the yard. Soldiers chuckled, not angry but amused, and the sound sliced into the prisoner's pride. Yumi's cheeks burned, her head bowed, while Ayami glared like fire. The moment crackled with tension. Between the two cultures, the line had never been clearer. One world that demanded obedience, another that offered freedom. When the day finally wound down, prisoners were herded back toward their barracks. But as Aiko walked, she felt a light touch on her shoulder. She turned, startled. A young American servicewoman stood there, ponytail swinging, eyes bright blue in the sun. She smiled softly, then pressed a small cloth bundle into Aiko's hands. Without a word, she turned and vanished into the crowd. Heart pounding, Aiko clutched the bundle to her chest. Back in the barracks, she unfolded it with trembling fingers. Inside lay a worn swimsuit, faded sea green, the fabric soft from use. Her breath caught. It wasn't just clothing. It was a key to another world. Ayame's voice thundered in her memory. "This is corruption, ruin." But Yumi's whisper rose just as strong. "If only we could, our lives would be different." Caught between those voices, Aiko felt her heart blaze. From this moment on, she knew there was no turning back. That night, the camp lay silent, broken only by the crunch of guards' boots outside and the hiss of insects in the dark. In the women's barracks, bodies shifted restlessly on wooden bunks. But Aiko could not sleep. Beneath her pillow, the cloth bundle seemed to burn. She sat up, hands trembling as she unwrapped it. The faded sea-green swimsuit glimmered faintly in the moonlight, alive with its own secret. She glanced around. The others appeared to be sleeping. Only Yumi's eyes flickered open, shining in the dark. "Are you going to?" Yumi whispered, voice quivering with both fear and excitement. Aiko pressed a finger to her lips. Then, clutching the swimsuit, she slipped out into the night. The pool lay waiting, a mirror of silver under the moon. Aiko stood at the edge, chest heaving. She peeled off her thin prisoner's dress and slipped into the cool fabric. It clung to her skin, unfamiliar and shocking, but it felt like stepping into someone else's life. Her legs shook as she stepped to the water's edge. Voices echoed in her head. Her mother's scolding, Ayami's fury, Keiko's mournful whisper about honor. But another voice rose louder. "Just once. Feel it. This is freedom." Aiko closed her eyes and stepped in. The water embraced her, cool and smooth. A sob burst from her lips, then turned into laughter. She spread her arms, letting the water lift her weight. It caressed every scar, every bruise, every memory she wanted washed away. For the first time, she wasn't a nurse, a daughter, a prisoner. She was simply herself. She floated on her back, staring up at the moon, tears blending with the pool water. Joy and grief tangled until she could no longer tell them apart. Then came the shout. "Aiko, what are you doing?" Her eyes flew open. On the deck stood Ayame, flanked by several women, their faces burned with fury. "You shame us." Ayame's voice cracked like thunder. "You strip in their pool. You disgrace every one of us. You betray Japan." Aiko froze in the water. Around Ayame, some women turned away in horror, but others stared, eyes wide, caught between envy and terror. Then Yumi burst forward. No, she's not betraying anyone. She's living. For once, she's free. The air split with their shouting. Ayami's rage against Yumi's defiance. Prisoners crowded the fence. Guards hurried over. But the Americans didn't stop it. They leaned on their rifles, smirking, as if watching a play they had no lines in. Aiko clung to the pool's edge, her heart tearing apart. Shame and ecstasy wrestled inside her like twin storms. Was she a traitor, or the first to break free? A whistle shrilled. Guards barked orders. The crowd dispersed. Rough hands yanked Aiko from the water, shoving her back toward the barracks. The swimsuit was ripped from her, flung onto the ground like something filthy. Back inside, silence swallowed her. No one spoke. No one met her eyes. Only Yumi slipped close, resting a trembling hand on her shoulder. You touched what all of us long for, she whispered. But only you dared. Tears streamed down Aiko's face. She knew there was no going back. She had crossed a line that would never disappear. August came, and with it the end of the war. The news that Japan had surrendered swept through the camp like a storm. Some prisoners wept openly, others screamed, a few collapsed in silence. For them it wasn't just a nation's defeat, it was the collapse of the honor they had clung to so desperately. Repatriation was announced. The barracks buzzed with uneasy energy. Women gathered their meager belongings, scraps of cloth, a hidden letter, a trinket pilfered from the camp. No one spoke of the pool, but Aiko felt the weight of eyes, some filled with contempt, others with unspoken envy. On the morning of departure, they were marched past the yard one last time. The pool shimmered in late summer light. A few American women still lounged on deck chairs, laughter ringing out like farewell music. Aiko stopped, transfixed. She remembered the night she had slipped into that water, the chill, the lift, the laughter torn from her chest. For the first time, she had felt herself alive. That memory burned brighter than any shame. Then a figure stepped forward. It was the young American servicewoman, the one who had given her the swimsuit. Their eyes met. The woman smiled, leaned close, and in broken Japanese whispered, "Don't forget that feeling." The words seared into Aiko's heart. On the voyage home, the ocean pitched and groaned. Ayame sat stiff, clutching her prayer beads, lips pressed thin. Yumi leaned against Aiko, her voice barely audible over the waves. "We'll never be like them. But we saw another world. I'll never forget." Aiko turned her gaze to the horizon. She said nothing, but the answer was already alive inside her. When they disembarked at Yokohama, devastation met them. The city lay in ruins, charred beams, rubble, the acrid smell of ash. Women shuffled through the wreckage in tattered kimonos, children clinging to their sleeves. No music, no laughter, no shimmering water. Life resumed in hardship. But every night, in the silence of her room, Aiko closed her eyes and saw the pool. She heard the echo of women's laughter under the sun. Instead of fading, the vision grew sharper, like a seed sprouting roots. Years later, when Japan began to change, girls in shorter skirts on city streets, women taking jobs, some even driving cars, Aiko felt her chest tighten. Each small step forward lit up the memory of that night in the pool. As a teacher, she sometimes watched her students, bright-eyed girls in neat uniforms, laughing, whispering dreams of the future. One day, she told them a story, leaving out the shame, but keeping the truth. Once, in the darkest of times, I saw women who lived freely. And I believe you can too. Her student stared, not fully understanding, but in Aiko's eyes shone a fire that needed no explanation. What once felt like disgrace had become her guiding light. The memory of American women swimming and sunbathing in a prison camp lived on, not as humiliation but as proof that freedom, once glimpsed, could never be erased. For Aiko, that pool was not just water. It was a mirror, showing her a self she never thought could exist. And it would remain in her mind forever, an untouchable freedom carried across borders, time, and silence.